Here's my gas can. My brother Josh blew himself up and his two kids. People coming into my house and assaulting me and my wife and hurting us and stuff. Is your family missing?
For those who don't know, Martin Cabello III is the semi-famous owner of an Instagram account with almost 500,000 followers. He is known around the internet for posting strange videos of himself doing humorous things and speaking nonsensical and odd phrases. His constant and daily posting on numerous social media platforms gives his wide audience a consistent view into his life and thoughts, often leaving them in confusion. Most people tend to play off everything Martin says as a joke, or simply choose to make fun of him for the funny things he says, coupled with the fact that he is autistic. In doing so, they not only do him a disservice, but also themselves. As a child, Martin was always perceived as curious. He would play tricks on friends and family using his grandfather's parrot, who would always indicate how many people were on the other side of a wall.
And I used to tell people I could see through walls, to the point where I had to stop doing it. They thought I was delusional.
Many think that his childhood could be a factor to his strange behavior since he has had a long dissociation from his family. In many of his videos, he discusses the horrific past he alleges to have with his family, who took part in all manner of abuse and exploitation. Martin claims to have a restraining order against his own mother for the reasons just stated, as well as because of an apparent insurance fraud attempt. This dissociation isn't only with his family, though. It also includes the government and/or military, as well as organized religion. However, Martin hasn't always held such a vehement disdain for these groups. He believes that when he was younger he was crucified, and then saved by a US soldier. He claims this event started his infatuation with the US government and the military. This event is not confirmed and will be touched on later, but Martin does have a fascination with the US military, and that fascination starting at such a young age could have eventually led to him joining the military. Martin was also influenced heavily by the Roman Catholic Church during his childhood. His exposure to Roman Catholicism and the Bible led him to develop some strange and unique views on spiritual topics, but that will also be explored later. When reaching adulthood, Martin apparently joined the US Air Force. Although previously he has claimed that he is ex-military, the reason I say apparently is because according to Martin, he doesn't know.
People keep asking me if I'm former military or active military. I don't know.
He often alludes to taking part in government mental experiments such as drug therapy and Project MKUltra. Projects such as these, specifically MKUltra, are experiments on human test subjects to see if specific drugs such as LSD could be used to brainwash and control individuals. These experiments were led by the CIA and were done mostly illegally in foreign nations such as Germany, Japan, and the Philippines. The experiments were essentially forms of torture done primarily on those considered enemies of the state because they were confirmed or speculated communists. The project officially ended in 1973, 4 years before Martin was born, but the sensitivity of the project has led many to believe that it continued for much longer than what has been reported.
Today's subject, MKUltra. Is it real? And if it is, does it come with a free education?
At some point in Martin's life, he received a traumatic brain injury, which seems to have caused all the confusion he experiences. He speaks a lot about his constantly shifting memories and how he remembers certain things but cannot recall others. These fragmented memories have left him with strange and horrific events stuck in his head, causing him to believe the people in the world around him are responsible for truly awful crimes that he speaks of quite often. Details about his time in the military, his apparent involvement in psychological experiments regarding his neural plasticity, as well as events that allegedly have taken place between him and his neighbors, all mixed together through his videos, and it is unclear what out of all of this is true and how the stories actually line up. Martin also allegedly works with the Catholic Church to help foster children being used for trafficking by the US military. He's provided documentation of these foster children, although has never shown them on camera. One of the major aspects of Martin's view of the world he lives in is that he lives near and among those who are propagating a massive child trafficking ring. His belief in that is a key motivator for much of what he posts, as a large portion of the things he talks about relate directly to the idea that he's being silenced and persecuted by the people in charge of this ring. What exactly it is that Martin does to combat this is somewhat unknown. As just stated, Martin apparently uses some kind of fostering program through the church to combat this, although to what extent he does this, when, where, and how are all completely unknown. One might even argue that none of it is even true. Essentially, Martin has had a rather crazy and mysterious past. His childhood is filled with strange events, and his early adulthood years prove to be even more confusing. What we do know is that Martin used to be much larger and in much worse shape than he is now, which changed after he became dedicated to being physically fit. This video will focus mostly on his more extraordinary claims and theories, but we would be remiss if we didn't mention his physical transformation, as well as the fact that many of his posts are related to fitness and diet. It appears that Martin may have some kind of psychosis, as much of what he says is beyond unbelievable and oftentimes contradictory. The main point that he constantly tries to get across is his involvement in some kind of child liberation group that is a target of both the government and his neighbors, that try to shut down his efforts to protect children and expose the corruption of the organizations that support this system. His changing memories and odd testimonies indicate that much of what he speaks is likely completely untrue, although there are times when things he talks about contain at least half-truths that correspond with reality. Enter Josh Powell.
I want you to reach out to those 3 men who stated they were members of the FBI and ask them how many people they did that to, that you guys watched the things they do to me, how many other people they did that to, and how many people actually survived. Honest question, right? You can reach out to the maraud of people you guys seen come in my tour guides and ask them, right, how many people did they do that to? And how many survived?
Yeah.
Because right now, I think I'm the only one.
Although there are a lot of different sources that cover this topic in depth, this will always be a serious point of discussion since it is very tragic. Josh Powell was born in Puyallup, Washington in 1976. He met his eventual wife, Susan, in Tacoma, Washington after a dinner party. They moved to Utah and had 2 sons, Charles and Braden. In December of 2009, a neighbor checked in on Susan and her sons after a church service and was there until about 5 p.m. Apparently, this was the last time she was seen. Josh took their 2 sons on a camping trip that night and were missing for the entire next day before returning home. The mysterious part is that Susan did not return home with them, but according to Josh, she was left at home while they were on the trip. The rest of Josh's story was also suspicious because many details didn't line up, such as Josh not telling his boss he wouldn't be coming into work on Monday. A lot of other occurrences happened that also led many to believe Josh might have actually killed his wife. As a child, Josh's parents weren't the best. It is reported that his father showed him and his brothers illicit content at a very young age, while also allowing misbehavior to never be corrected. These behaviors included, but were not limited to, killing small animals, such as a gerbil that was his sister's pet, and threatening his mom with a butcher's knife. Things like these all raised red flags, leading many to believe that Josh was also mentally unstable and willing to kill his wife for seemingly no reason. It didn't help that in the following years after Susan's disappearance, Josh acted with highly suspicious behavior. Josh apparently asked co-workers about hiding bodies in a mine shaft, and withdrew his children from daycare after they revealed some information that I don't believe he wanted them to. Charles revealed that they had gone camping that weekend, but unlike how Josh told it, Susan did join them but didn't come home. Braden drew a picture of the family in a car and labeled that Mommy was in the trunk. Josh moved back to Puyallup, Washington, staying with his father, 2 brothers, and sister. After moving back to Washington, the website SusanPowell.org was launched to defend Josh and make it seem as though all the suspicion towards him was a front from Susan's family to smear his name after the potential abuse of his wife. This website has not had a confirmed creator, but many believe it to have been Josh and his father Stephen. There are also many theories about what actually happened to Susan. Perhaps her body was stored in a mine shaft, or maybe she and a journalist who also went missing close to the same date as her had escaped to Brazil. The website and Josh claimed the latter. Josh kept claiming that his sons were being neglected by Susan's parents, and until the day he died, continually expressed that he didn't have anything to do with the disappearance of his wife. Finally, on February 5th, 2012, Josh Powell, while on visit with his sons, forced the social worker out of the house murdered his sons with a hatchet later found near his body, and set his house on fire, finally killing the boys and himself. This is a tragic story, which could probably result in a video itself because of how in-depth and weird this story is. But why is it important to the lore of Martin Cabello? Oftentimes, Martin is quoted saying,
"Here's my gas can. My brother Josh blew himself up and his 2 kids. Right after members of the military, like Alan Jaber did to me, psychologically gaslit him, set up fake scenarios, psychologically torturing people, physically torturing people."
Many might think this is just an awful joke, or simply a weird thought that Martin has. But it's not. Remember where Josh grew up, and where he ended up before killing himself. Puyallup, Washington. Martin was also in Washington during these events. Martin's mother lived right behind Susan and her family's house. Josh and Martin both attended Rogers High School in Pierce County. And an even stranger detail is that Martin was born November 29, 1977, and Josh was born January 20th, 1976. There's no way that these two didn't at least know each other, and it's very likely they could have been friends. The house that Martin currently lives in, which is the address in his Instagram bio, is a mere 12 minutes from the house that Josh blew up in 2012. Martin believes that Josh was gaslighted by the government to kill himself and his 2 children.
Go. My gas can. I was just talking to Kara and my neuroplasticity, remembering when I started this sequence, my son asked me if I was going to blow myself up or hang myself in this corner with my gas can, like one of my neighbor's son-in-laws did. You think about this in real life. If evil men in the military can interject into mine and my wife's life and exploit her autism and my autism and convince her that I'm having an affair and that I'm a bad person, they could get me to lose it and shoot up a school, blow up a building, shoot up the sheriff's department, right? They could abduct her and abscond with her, right? And the community would think I did it. And I'd have no other choice but to take my own life. Can you guys connect some dots? Do you have the ability to connect some dots?
He thinks in a very similar way to what happened to him, which will be talked about later on, that there were fake scenarios created around them by corrupted members of Susan's family and the military, and Josh's only way out was suicide. Martin believes that Josh was being framed for the death of Susan, which is what Josh said about the situation. Martin seems to indicate that the framing was being done because of Josh's attempts to help exploited children, perhaps the same ring that Martin constantly tries to expose himself. Keep in mind that the evidence seems very much to the contrary. I suppose that Martin's explanation is that the entire thing was set up, and all the evidence that pointed to Josh's involvement in Susan's murder was fabricated. This ties into Martin's belief that what happened to Josh is happening to him. What I can confirm is that Martin claims to have fostered children, and in his mind it is in order to protect them from child trafficking and drugs. Whether this is true or not is still a gray area within the lore.
The neighbor behind me, I don't know if you know the Powells, their son was part of my group of people who did Ernie to foster care and ended up committing suicide.
Oh. Wait a minute.
Yes,
Powell with the 2 kids?
This one he's saying is somebody else.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah, so he committed suicide, and people ask why. I'm like, initially he reached out and said, I'm being harassed and psychologically tormented and told I need to do things, and I can't deal with it anymore. And he ended up taking his own life. And I volunteered to say, I'll volunteer to you publicly send kids to my house, and we'll see how it works out.
There's another connection between Martin and Josh that many others don't point out. Josh was, at least until college, a Mormon. He belonged to the Church of Christ of Latter-day Saints, and until college was going to LDS Woods. It may seem unnecessary to mention Josh's religious affiliations, but upon examining the spiritual claims and the views of Martin, there are stunning similarities between them and the testimonies of the founder and prophet of Mormonism, Joseph Smith.
Martin has a profound fascination with world religions, specifically Christianity. On many posts he quotes the Bible or uses references from Bible stories. He also many times uses the Bible and events from it to make cryptic, rhyming messages. This fascination with Christ most likely came from his interactions with the Roman Catholic Church at a young age. According to Martin, while at church he witnessed what he calls a body of light calling to him. Remember this term as it will become integral to his views on reality. He informed the pastor of this body of light, and the pastor, quote, entertained him, and followed Martin as he took him to where he said the light was drawing him. The two of them followed it until coming to a door with a window where the pastor apparently ceased entertaining Martin and actually claimed to see God in the place Martin had guided him to. For whatever reason, the pastor called the archdiocese and the military, which led to the military giving Martin's family a down payment on a house to ensure that he would be an altar boy. Why these forms of authority were involved and for what purpose isn't really stated, but we must assume that the pastor wanted Martin in the position of an altar boy because of his ability to see the body of light that led him to see God. If Martin did work as an altar boy, he would have been around Christianity and those who devote their lives to it. He does confirm that he had to participate in an altar boy graduation. The starting age for an altar boy is generally around the age of 7, and becoming a knight is around 15. Assuming this graduation is at around the age of 15, throughout Martin's most influential years he was around the Catholic Church quite often. The point of mentioning this is to provide what seems to be the origin of what has been titled as Martin's own religion, Cabelloism. Cabelloism doesn't have any real followers, as it doesn't actually contain a moral code or even a real theology, although he does state that he is looking for disciples of Cabelloism to prove, quote, through natural sciences the existence of the Creator. Cabelloism is a mix of the Bible, quantum physics, and a dieting method called ketosis. Basically, Martin connects biblical terms to things relating to physics and biology. In Cabelloism, the Bible is not necessarily a book of objective truth, but rather a collection of codes that all other religions carry as well. For example, the first man, Adam, is a code for atoms, the things that make up all matter. The 7 seals in Revelation are the 7 divisions of the electromagnetic field. A phrase that is repeated a lot is, a body of light that Israel light, obviously meant to sound like the word Israel or Israelite. In Cabelloism, light itself is God and is the origin of all matter. It sacrifices itself on a cross over from energy to matter so that we humans are created in the image of the Creator. Another 2 plays on concepts integral to the biblical narrative. A casual look at his page will reveal countless posts where he is either repeating these strange mantras in the videos or in the caption.
Don't mind me while I babble on for a few seconds. G is us. G is us. Jesus. Who is G? That is us. The singularity and birth of every religion's reality. The body of light, standing in the center 7 seals of the electromagnetic spectrum, with a head, a torso, 2 arms, and 2 legs, that truly does sacrifice itself on a crossover from energy into all the matter we need to be created in its image.
His Twitter page is also chock full of these strange mantras, linking all kinds of other things together. His handle is literally My Babel Project. His bio also says that the Church of Scientology helped him write 2 books, a rabbit hole that I won't even begin to dive into. The name of Martin's Instagram page is also quite peculiar. It is a bit hard to read, split up with underscores that make it difficult to understand what is even being said. Most would read it as time to mass, so I exist. But really, this name is in reference to something Martin is obsessed with called the Higgs field theory. This is a physics theory that goes a bit over my head, but it has to do with mass, potential energy, and energy transfer. Martin describes the Higgs field theory as such: an infinite field of energy that dominates every area of the universe and traps our matter in its field, tying it to mass and giving it time to exist in reality. Through this explanation, we see that the title of his page is a play on that definition, with the underscore between TI and ME being there to make it able to be read as both tie me to mass so I exist and time to mass so I exist.
My garage door opener? Now I want you to think about my name. Tie me to mass so I exist, and apply that to yourself. Your consciousness, your soul, your spirit. The organization of information inside the energy that makes up your spark of light that is real light cannot be created nor destroyed.
The main idea of all of this is that he, Martin, has been given some form of divine revelation on the topic of human diet and biology. One could argue that to be a follower of Cabelloism is simply to follow the diet and workout regimen that Martin presents in a large number of his posts. An entire video of its own could be made regarding Cabelloism as a topic, although this probably isn't a very fruitful discussion as far as the fine details go. Obviously, all of this is simply drawing random parallels between concepts and words and applying them in such a way that is senseless and ever-changing. When introducing this section, we mentioned Josh Powell's former affiliation with the Mormon Church. Despite Martin's connection to the Roman Catholic Church, his self-proclaimed origin story is very similar to that of the founder of Mormonism. Martin claims to have seen God at a young age, ultimately leading him to create his own religion. He also seems to allude to persecution because of his views and abilities, though through the personification of his Ernie doll when he displays him being tied to a tree and tortured for making a body of light that Israelite appear, just like what he did in the church with the pastor.
Now we gotta tie Ernie to this tree. He won't stop making a body of light that Israelite appear in the 7 seals of what a rainbow reveals. He definitely must be a witch, or a brujo, or something like that, but his grandma isn't very pleased with him making people appear in the light, so he's gonna have to suffer till he stops.
This is very similar to the testimony of Joseph Smith, who claimed to have seen God at the young age of 14 and was subsequently persecuted, according to his testimony. This may be an unintentional parallel, but it's certainly possible that if Josh and Martin ever spoke about their religious views in their youth, Josh may have spoken to him about the alleged story of the prophet of his religion. Could it be that Martin took inspiration from the story of Joseph Smith and used this idea to formulate his story of seeing the body of light and then becoming the founder and centerpiece of his own religion? This may be total speculation, but it is certainly possible. Cabelloism being entirely fabricated by Martin doesn't seem very important in the long run, especially when compared to the real-world legal implications of many of the things that Martin speaks about. But Cabelloism and the beliefs it contains may actually be very central to the way that Martin views himself, others, and the world.
I don't know if you can see this sign. It's a picture of me. It says, "Caution, there's a predator." Whoever put it there, can you make sure you put it at the rest of the bus stops that surround my community? In real life, children got to witness me get them out of weird situations where men were setting them up to be preyed upon. I'm a danger to men who want to have sex with the children that congregate at bus stops in my area. So can you make sure you put those pictures up everywhere children congregate? I truly am a danger to those men who want to have sex with those kids.
Martin's current and ongoing issue is with his neighbors, Al and Jerry. This is all 100% testimonies from Martin. We do not intend to make this seem as though it's the truth in any way. But Martin believes that the Pierce County Sheriff's Department, alongside his neighbors Al and Jerry, are running a pedophilia ring. Currently, Martin is trying to help children get out of sex trafficking by the US military. There also seems to be some correlation between this and an event that Martin claims gave him a traumatic brain injury. Martin has changed the story a few times, so here are the details that aren't consistent. An FBI agent, or someone from the US military, sometimes it's both, comes to Martin's house. He then takes Martin's wife and tries to do a series of either sexual or physical harm to her in order to get Martin to sign papers. There are some facts that differ. Sometimes it's to take their son away. Sometimes they bring prostitutes and try to make Martin fornicate with them. One time he even mentions that the clothing company Helly Handsome had sent them to get him to sign an ad waiver to promote their products, which he must have given into, seeing as he had gone through a long period of advertising their clothing and gear.
Helly Hansen makes me hella handsome while I'll end up helping Hanson, because honesty and integrity are part of their corporate policy. When I trek the mountains and travel the 7 seas, Helly Hansen makes it a breeze.
No matter what, he constantly repeats that they gave him a traumatic brain injury that led him to seek professional help from either therapy or medicine. The confusing part is that there is a potential actual event that happened that may be the inspiration for these claims about his persecution from the government. This actual event starts with Martin apparently strangling his son for some unknown reason. Martin's parents came to stop this, but how they knew is unknown. Our current theory is Martin and his son were arguing. Heather called Martin's parents, and they came over to intervene. By the time they had arrived, Martin was strangling his son. This apparently led to Martin's son getting a restraining order on his father. The correlation? The FBI or military people are Martin's father, or at least those who are there to enforce the legal action needed on his behalf. Martin's mind sees them as another figure that he dislikes, which is the US military because of his past relations with them. The paper he needs to sign is the eventual restraining order. At one point he did end up calling the police to report, but the phone was apparently tapped.
I called 911 when some of those soldiers died. 911 transferred me over to the chain of command at the FBI and the local military bases. And the chain of command said they had not sent their best to silence us yet, and they would. Who did the military, my community of women and children, and international community see the FBI and the chain of command at the local military bases send to silence us? So men could be kept in place for blackmail, to commit treason, for counterintelligence. Who did the military send after threatening to send people on a tapped phone call to silence me?
These specific neighbors, Al and Jerry, allegedly broke into his house again, assaulted him, and re-injured his traumatic brain injury. He points out that they wrapped him in a garbage bag and left him for dead on the beaches of Ocean Shores. This city is approximately 2 hours and 25 minutes away from Martin's house in Puyallup, but it's a repeated fact that Martin makes sure to mention every time he brings up his neighbors Al and Jerry. A somewhat similar occurrence happened, but instead he blames Josh Powell's grandparents. These events are only documented on Martin's social media. In a recent post, he reveals newer memories of his wife being kept from him after this traumatic event by her attorney.
I'm having these discussions with my wife about her attorney. I'm telling her I remember or have a memory of her attorney keeping my wife from me after we were beaten, raped, sex trafficked, and forced to give away a child so that a Dr. Courtney Hunt and other people can make money off of my wife's and my information. Her attorney repeatedly sustained that traumatic brain injury so other people could make money while pretending to represent her and me. That's my memory. When I reported bestiality, sex trafficking, homicide, children being forced to have sex with a dead body, things like that, her attorney was one of the people that helped cover that up so other people could profit.
Even for Martin, this area of alleged events is strange. Unlike everything before this, it never really affected people directly. We never see Martin's mom, nor if she was actually abusing him. Josh Powell was a real person, and the events in that story are horrible and tragic, but Martin's comments on it haven't really affected the outcome of the events. Instead, this time, Martin has put his neighbors onto a chopping block, spreading information, possibly misinformation, that could potentially ruin their lives. But to Martin, he thinks he's doing the right thing. Like Josh Powell, he thinks that these people are trying to gaslight him. To him, they are trying to get videos of him breaking his moral code. There is another person that is a possible suspect. Matt from the FBI is a villain in Martin's story that was not only responsible for the events described earlier, but also part of the investigation on these events.
Today's subject, situational awareness. Matt from the FBI, who was assigned to investigate assault and rape against me and my wife, covering up the rape against me and my wife, and then trying to set up the murder-suicide situation of me and my wife to cover up the theft and selling of babies. Does that make every one of the cases he's involved in required to be reinvestigated, since he's actually a criminal as well? And would that require his chain of command to be investigated as well for covering that stuff up? And is that how bad guys in our area are getting away with sex trafficking and pedophilia? A connection in the FBI.
The only other proof of gaslighting is hidden within the children that Martin helps. Martin says in one of his posts that the children have witnessed these similar events happen multiple times. They witness the FBI, police, or military trying to gaslight Martin by threatening lives or by taking his wife and threatening to do other things that Martin has explained in depth multiple times. Ernie, for those who don't know, is a Muppet from Sesame Street paired next to his roommate Bert. Bert is portrayed as weary of the world, while Ernie is naive but often the troublemaker. Ernie's naivety connects to Martin's own view of himself, an innocent child who seems to get himself in trouble when he doesn't mean to. In the series of posts, Martin is seen torturing Ernie in many different and unique ways. He can be seen waterboarding him, burning him at the stake, and even hanging him. What if I told you that in Martin's mind, he is Ernie? Starting with one of the more famous clips that we looked at earlier, Martin reveals that he needs to burn Ernie because he is creating a body of light that is real light.
Now we gotta tie Ernie to this tree. He won't stop making a body of light that is real light appear in the 7 seals of what a rainbow reveals. So he's gonna have to suffer till he stops.
Ernie is creating this body of light that is real light, maybe not of his own choice, and is being punished for it. Martin was punished in a similar way according to his own story. Something we didn't mention in the section about Cabelloism is that Martin apparently was crucified and burned, and a US soldier saved him. He describes, almost with tears, his testimony, making it all more believable.
Here's a detail from my childhood that led to my infatuation with the American Special Forces. When I was a little boy, I got crucified. They placed me on a cross and lit it on fire. I thought I was dying, and I called out to God, and an American Special Forces agent from the back, "Hoorah! Who is raw?" And he proceeded with a phrase, and he walked into the fire and removed me from it. The witnesses across the street and things like that wrote that I had disappeared. I vanished. And that guy told me if I grew up and got my own phrase, I could walk through walls.
If Martin was a previous US soldier, then it is important to note that Martin also saves Ernie, which we know because we see Ernie make multiple reappearances. Ernie then goes through a series of different torture episodes, similar to how the government and CIA would torture individuals taking part in the MKUltra experiments. Some of Martin's posts also start with Martin playing out scenarios with Ernie that then lead into story time.
This is Ernie's pimp ride he uses to pick up chicks. People keep asking me why Josh Powell committed suicide and blew himself up with his 2 children. If you pay attention to the story from the very beginning, he said he was being framed to look like a bad person while being hunted and psychologically and physically tortured by members of the military. And everybody said he was insane. The military doesn't do anything like that. And then I decided to pick up his gas can and show the world, does the military actually hunt, stalk, and try to kill the people who take care of sexually exploited women and children and try to frame them for shit they never did? What do you think the international community and the local community of women and children got to see the military do? Right? They got to see Josh Powell was speaking the truth.
Sometimes these scenarios are meaningless, like in the video just played, but sometimes they're related to the events of the story. Or sometimes, Ernie straight up does something from Martin's past. Martin even posted a seemingly unrelated meme about Ernie being a war criminal. This would have no relevance to someone just passing by, but as we look deeper, there is a chance that Martin sees himself as a war criminal because of how he turned against the military and their horrible ways. He sees his own torture from his past and sees his experiences through acting out scenarios with Ernie. The biggest question is why? Why Ernie? Why repeat the torture? The reason is because he uses Ernie to create a digital library of his memories, that even through brainwashing and MKUltra-esque torture, he will be able to go back to these videos and remember everything, unless they are deleted, of course. Ernie is an expression of Martin's memories, a method for him to demonstrate and broadcast the things that happened to him in such a way that the average viewer may not see it as anything revealing. Ernie is Martin, and that's what all of this is about. Just as Ernie is repeatedly beaten, tortured, and even nearly killed, the soldier is always there to save him, despite being from the same establishment that causes his pain. Ernie is Martin's messenger. the one through whom he reveals his apparent truths. Ernie is merely a doll, and the messages in the videos he is in can be easily ignored or overlooked because of the silly nature of the puppeteering. But in reality, Ernie is Martin's most prolific voice. If you think we're making this up or simply stretching his nonsensical posts to make a funny narrative, you are wrong. Everything just presented to you is what Martin calls transference, a psychological phenomenon in which a person dealing with intensive negative emotions will transfer their experiences and feelings onto someone or something.
This week's subject is going to be transference in the field of psychotherapy, or the ability a human has to push their feelings and emotions off onto someone else or an inanimate object so that doesn't trigger PTSD or an anxiety. I'll give you an example. Say I was tortured or went through a traumatic event. A therapist would have me talk about that event as if it happened to Ernie, my doll, so that Ernie would carry those emotions, Ernie would carry those feelings. Allowing me to talk about those things happening to Ernie desensitizes me to those feelings and allows me to no longer carry those feelings inside of me since Ernie is carrying them for me, alleviating that pressure on my psychology so it doesn't exacerbate my PTSD or anxiety. This week's subject, transference in the field of psychotherapy.
Whether you believe that any of these events ever actually occurred, Martin seems to believe they did. Ernie is the key to everything. If you want to uncover what truly happened to Martin, well, that may never be known for sure. But if you want to at least get an idea of what he believes happened to him and what continues to transpire, you'd be wise to examine that rugged and beaten, but alive and strong Ernie doll.